I would probably say when I started to really think about the internet differently was kind of when I was in college. I went in, I thought I was going to do political science, and then I realized that I actually hate politicians and sort of the people that I was sort of interacting with. And I started taking more classes in like communication, technology, and sort of finding this sort of kind of weird intersection of like what I have always referred to as like millennial identity. We're being and I guess maybe even backing up a little bit further is I'm probably a little old for the crypto industry compared to a lot of the sort of degen 20 somethings out there. I'm in my 30s, but yeah, I think when I was in school, I really started to realize like the power of the internet. School was something that I knew that I had to go do, but when I what I really found interesting was like being on the internet and making things and about my junior year, I actually yeah, this is good. Yeah, this is a good one. So my about my junior year, I was looking for an internship. I just needed to make a little bit of money just to sort of survive. And I was living in this house, and the guys that were next to me were starting a company. And I was like, what the hell does this even mean? So I ended up like having some chats. I went in, I did 2 days of like the normal intern sort of data entry stuff. And I went to my friend who I had talked with and sort of helped coordinate the internship. And I was like, "Yo, this is great. I really appreciate this opportunity, um, but this sucks. Like, I could be doing so much more with my time than like plugging in data into like a gigantic database." And the response was like, "Well, you're studying communications, like you're sort of doing this whole internet thing, like why don't you go help Jesse with the social media?" And that was sort of the day one of sort of how I like to think about like really taking sort of this next era of the internet of sort of being able to connect with people a little bit more seriously. I genuinely I'll never forget that first day I was sitting in this office in Western Mass, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm just, responding to people and like chatting with people in the community and whatnot. And I remember I was having a full length sort of conversation. This is like pre-threads, long posts saying that kind of stuff. So it's literally going back tweet by tweet. I was talking to somebody in Iowa, and I was just like, I'm sitting in Western Mass and I can just go on the internet and connect with all these people. I think that was sort of like a big turning point for me and sort of how I thought about sort of what the internet could be used for. At the time it was like people had MySpace and Facebook and all that kind of shit, but being able to actually start to have meaningful conversations with people who, at least at that time, where it was sort of pseudo anonymous. I mean, people had branded accounts and whatnot, but really being able to chat with folks. And I was pretty early on Twitter as a result of all of that, and it was definitely something that sort of changed my perspective on sort of what the internet can be used for. Um, and then sort of fast forward, I graduated, I joined that company, and it was at that company when I actually first heard about sort of crypto, and there was a guy on the engineering team who sent everybody the Bitcoin white paper, and I vividly remember every single person being like, "What the hell is this? Like, this is like, dude, you're just throwing your money into the internet," and just no one took him seriously, um, which was a mistake. I mean, that dude has bought like two houses with all this Bitcoin money at this point. Then sort of fast forward, and then I got into sort of the Ethereum run in like 2015, 2016. I was living with a guy who was working in sort of the banking space, and he was just like, "Dude, you got to check all this kind of stuff out." And I think at that time, it was very much like this is a financial opportunity. This isn't like I didn't necessarily like I didn't think about the technology component of it. I was just like, number go up, that's great for me. Um, and then sort of held out, just stuck around. And then it's actually funny as I was thinking about sort of this talk today, or sort of like connecting with you, I was thinking of like, this isn't financial advice unless you want to lose money, because I've actually done a really wonderful job at losing money over the last sort of couple of years. But I mean, somebody sent me Bored Apes, the day it was minting, and I thought to myself, I was like, why the hell would I waste my precious ETH on these JPEGs? Like, it didn't register for me. Um, and then fast forward. a little bit further into 2021 ish, the Hundreds, which is a clothing company out of LA, is a brand that I've known and loved for years. I mean, I think they've been around for 30 years at this point, 25, 30 years. Um, they were releasing an NFT collection, and for some reason, it clicked for me then because I was just like, this is a trusted brand that I've known and loved, that's sort of doing this thing that I had heard about. And to be honest with you, I sort of just went down the rabbit hole from there and, got involved with a bunch of different DAOs and have been just working on different projects and launched some miscellaneous things, some things that have worked, some things that haven't. And then and I think this is probably a good, good sort of wrap up of my life to date. Um, in January, I very publicly um, I left Twitter. It had been 15 years. I actually left on the 15th anniversary of me signing up, because I just didn't like every time I went on the app, it like just bummed me out. And it was right around that time that I, finally set up my Farcaster sort of Workcast ecosystem accounts and whatnot, and sort of have been riding this wave, and it's just been such a wonderful year, um in this ecosystem, and meeting people and sort of being pushed to try new things and exploring things and learning things. But yeah, so that's sort of Jack to date.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate the story. And I'm curious, like when you decided to leave Twitter, like you said, 15 years, like I've been on Twitter for uh, roughly, I think almost exactly 5 years actually.
Cool.
And that feels like a long time. Like I almost, it gets to a certain point you like couldn't imagine going without it. Even Farcaster, I've been on for maybe 2.5 years or something like that. And at this point, it's like, what would I do without Farcaster? It's like I'm on Farcaster every day, like all the time. Too much probably. And so I guess one thing is like my Twitter usage as a result of using Farcaster more, my and just being on Farcaster more. My Twitter usage has definitely gone down to the point where like I could imagine not using it. It feels despite resonating with what you said around like, you spend too much time on Twitter on a given day and you're just like, you know, kind of bummed out. Like it just doesn't really feel great.
Yeah.
But despite all of that, I think I'm not the first person to say this, but it's kind of like a slot machine where, playing slots all the time is not fun. I mean, for some people, I guess it is, but for most, like for me, it's like sounds pretty depressing. But
Yeah.
like once in a while, you might win, like big. And with Twitter, I would say like not even financially really, but just like so it's hard, if it's not as measurable as something like money, then it becomes, hard. If it's something harder to measure, it's harder to quantify, et cetera. But just generally speaking, I feel like I've sort of hit a few home runs over the years just by being on Twitter, so that I'm sort of exposed to a certain, opportunity that comes up, or I meet a certain person. A lot of the podcasts, before this, my 4-year-old podcast, a lot of the guests that I've had on, I sort of discovered by being on Twitter and was able to connect with them. And so like there's been a bunch of value, but yeah, I don't know. It's definitely less intriguing and less exciting for me to be on, and just, you know, being on it is less sort of fun than it once was. And a large part of that I think is because being on Farcaster has gotten a lot more fun and a lot more enjoyable. And
Yeah.
it feels like it's something that's evolving and getting better, and the network of people is growing, and the network of people is still small enough that it can be of quite a high quality, I feel. And I'm able to connect with people like you. So I'm curious, when you decided to leave Twitter, it sounds like you didn't really have like you kind of left the ship without a lifeboat. Like Farcaster emerged as the lifeboat, but you didn't really have that at the time. You were just going to go like cold turkey on social media, huh?
Yeah, yeah, which, and I think Threads was sort of trying to be a thing, and like Blue Sky was out, and there were all these sort of different sort of options. But to be honest with you, the content and community and sort of honestly, it was just the people, weren't really there. And it's funny, you mentioned like how you got on Twitter and sort of meeting people and sort of connecting with people. And early days of Twitter, I mean, Yeah, I've slid into the DMs of so many people that I really respect and like, like blue check marks before, you could buy one.
Right.
Because early days on those platforms, it really was a big conversation. It was the Wild West. And I think what particularly drew me to Farcaster, um, well, it is that, right? It's like, you sign up and you can talk to these people that have these gigantic followings and these people who, are tastemakers and are interesting people that are doing really interesting things. And, I think, yeah, I don't know if that's just sort of the audience or type of people that are there, or if it's sort of the sort of point where we're at in sort of the evolution of the network. But it's like you could DM somebody and that has a ton of followers, that's super busy, and they'll hit you back. I mean, and I sort of felt that there was this big shift that kind of happened away from Twitter, where it was like Twitter, at least for me, at least my algorithm was just like people dunking on people, and it's like, that's I don't need that. I don't need that in my life, right? Like I'm trying to live, you know positively, and that sort of just, I didn't want to be a part of that, and I kind of walked away. And I still check Twitter, but it's hard not to. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a plan, and I got very lucky to sort of be starting to get active on Warpcast around that time. And the last 8-10 months or so have just been really really special to me, I guess. It's just been a really great learning experience, connected with a lot of people, and it's just been really really great.
Are there any parallels besides like sort of this ability to, reach out to kind of anyone and like be pretty likely to get a response? Are there any parallels that you sort of recognize or differences that are, that you recognize from, where Farcaster is and has been for the last year, like sort of how it feels now and today versus Twitter in like, 2010 through 2015.
For sure.
Even just in the sense that like you mentioned, like as a super simple thing, like when you started on Twitter, you could only, there's the strict character limit, and then, they expanded it. You could do threads and whatnot. And like, even these small changes, which can sort of like materially change the experience. And I feel like at the time, I mean, by the time I got to Twitter, it wasn't really like and I had sort of, I probably had been like a consumer on Twitter prior to 5 years ago, but I didn't have like an account that I was actually tweeting from. And just I generally kind of try to use these things as much as a microphone as a something to read anyway. And so like,
Yeah.
given that I wasn't using a microphone whatsoever, I wasn't like checking Twitter every day or anything like that. But I had like, seen it over the years and whatever. And by the time I joined, it wasn't, it's like 2020. It wasn't like a technologically developing thing. I mean, I guess you could argue it even is becoming that, or has been becoming that now since Elon's taken over. Like he's trying to advance it beyond just, however many characters and tweets, and make it about,
Yep.
video and, communities and, eventually payments, evidently, or whatever else. So like he is trying to evolve it, not necessarily like technologically, but just in terms of like what it is. But I feel like for the majority of the 5 years that I've been on it, it's just like Twitter is what it is. Here's the people, go have fun. Whereas Farcaster is like, you know, every month on average, there's like a pretty large development, whether it's something that's shipped by the team or some new meta that arises, like degen tipping or,
Yep.
Clanker or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is exactly sort of reminiscent of like 2009 to like 2012, 2013, like that sort of timeline for Twitter, where it was like, there I there's obviously been a ton of changes to Twitter and sort of how the network works. But I mean, at one point in time, like you could share stuff and like it could very easily, go viral. Like I'm air quoting, but like, you could get a lot of traction on that platform. And then, what was interesting is that it was a great place to get the word out. And like the retweet mechanism, I think it's kind of crazy. People like don't like that wasn't really a concept that like I don't think I had seen before. But like the sort of baking in sort of the reshare amplification sort of component to Twitter, I think was like a huge unlock because the compounding effect of your audience times the number of people that potentially reposted it and sort of how their algorithm worked, like it was actually like a really viable place to grow a personal brand, to grow a brand, to build community, to connect with people. And I think that the sort of the shift, and I think this is also one of the big unlocks for me, and just how I think about sort of on chain sort of activity is like, I think Twitter and a lot of those platforms now have become very much it's like it's a homepage, right? Like you're reading information, you're consuming information, and in order to sort of get recognized, you have to be a content machine.
Right.
Which, to be honest with you, is like there have been periods of time in my career where it's like that's what I do for work. The last thing I want to go do when I get home is like make more content. Um, but what I think is really interesting is in that sort of model of like you have to be publishing constantly, sort of the light bulb moment for me, in the last couple of years is how, you're contributing to the network effect of the platform and you're not getting anything back in return, right? Is like the reason why Instagram is, Instagram and these platforms are these platforms. I always use Instagram as my example, but it's just like, I'm publishing so that the next time you open the app, there's more stuff for you to look at. And if there's more people coming back and looking at the app, that means that Facebook and Meta and Instagram, the network, can charge more money to advertisers. But that money doesn't necessarily come back to me, and certainly not in the same proportion in which you're spending on advertising dollars. It's like I worked at a major CPG brand. We had a $500,000 budget every month. And I can assure you that the people who were posting about our brand, were not receiving any of that money from the network. You know what I mean? So, the big unlock for me is this like I can contribute in a way that makes sense for me and that I think is meaningful and genuinely adds value back to sort of the community or sort of whatever group I'm sort of creating something for or around. And there is some monetary component of it, right? I mean, like, Warpcast does the $5 a day. I'm not, no one's retiring on that, but it's just like, you can produce stuff and, earn in a really meaningful way, which I think is that, like I said, that was sort of the big unlock for me. And it's, it's not all about money, but it's like, the recognition for your contribution to a network or a community, um, actually I feel like started to actually mean something, when I sort of made that switch from sort of Twitter to Warpcast.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's all these like different there's these different ways that you can get rewarded for engaging on Farcaster. I feel like that are it's not like quite as it's not as black and white as like here's how the advertising works, or the Warpcast rewards is like one example with the $5 a day. But there's like all of these different potential sort of like things that can happen, and like a lot of them are somewhat like unforeseeable. Like I would say one thing I guess is early on in Farcaster, I think there was probably more. I could be wrong about this, but my sense with it was that there's people like sort of hanging out on Farcaster with an expectation of like an airdrop for your
Mm. Yep.
the amount that you were casting or the engagement that you're getting or whatever. And like it seemed like that was like a thing for people, and like there was a thought that a decent number of people on the platform were like kind of actually just there for that, like engaging until the airdrop happened, and then they were gonna like take it and go away and say like thank you very much. And obviously that hasn't happened. And I don't think anyone who would be who would have been doing that at that time, like you don't keep posting for 2 years on like speculation that there might be an airdrop. Like it's just like way too much work
Yeah.
for some like unknown thing. And I mean it's work if you're doing it for that reason, but for those of us who are doing it, I think it's more or less play. And that's why you're not doing it with any expectation of something like that happening. You're just doing it because you like doing it. And
Exactly. Yeah.
as a result of doing that, though, it's like all these weird things happen. Like, degen tipping becomes a thing, and suddenly people are tipping your posts that they like, and you're like making a little bit of money from that. And like, some of these things, I mean, some people might make money on Farcaster. That's like sort of a needle moving amount. I don't think that's really happened for me. I mean, I haven't really like sort of sat down and been like, oh, I made this money this way and this money that way, or whatever. But regardless, it's just like it's way better than Twitter, where on Twitter, to your point, it's you're all based on it around an advertising model, and like there's a few creators, or however many creators that are like these sort of prolific content machines, like you said, that are posting all the time, or they're not necessarily content machines, but they're just like really famous, or whatever. They get a ton of engagement, and like yeah, those people are making the like Twitter payouts, and so they have recurring income from that, which is that's cool, but it's not that's like a top X% thing, where X is like, I don't know, a half of a percent of all people who are tweeting, or like probably less
Oh
than
yeah.
that, like a
Yeah.
hugely power law dynamic sort of thing. Um, and so it's just cool that you can participate in this social network, like hanging out online, doing things, trying things, building things, just, engaging with people who are building things, and permissionlessly, building things with them even, which I know you've been, pretty, at least as far as I've seen, like, a great example of that, with both, with what I'm doing with base colors, and you went and built fine art, and you've been doing all these other things, palettes and things like that. And then you just did the higher market, which what's the name of the URL actually?
Hiremarket.xyz.
Highermarket.xyz. Yeah, so I forgot to mention that earlier, but
No,
yeah,
no.
that's a sweet experiment. And these are like perfect examples where it's like, here's this community that I vibe with, and like, I can just go and do something with it. And like, not only is like no one gonna stop me, but it's like highly encouraged, and I can like sort of become a part of this thing as much as anyone else is a part of it, just by doing what I want to do with it. And I think that's super cool.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. That makes me think of one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got in one of my early jobs, which is it's like break your own thing first so you don't fuck up for the client. It's very 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 exact. I mean, it's like I like to go do the thing. So I guess another sort of aspect of my life is, I my background. I work in advertising, which I'm not the devil. I promise. I try to make the internet suck less. But I work in digital strategy, digital experience, and it's like I would never go into a meeting or pitch something or talk to somebody about something that I didn't at least know how it worked. And for me, and how I learn is like I can read the docs, but like it doesn't necessarily give me any context. Like I need to like make something, or I need to try something. Which has led me to make a lot of random things over the years. I mean, before I really got uh into sort of crypto, I built a project. I'm based in Boston, but we like built a project called Boston Curb Alert. It was online for 6 or 7 years, I think. But the general idea was anytime anybody posted any any free things that they were getting rid of. There's a huge college population in Boston, so September is like a big moving time. There's this whole idea of like the curb alert and stuff that people are getting rid of. But I basically built this app that anytime people posted to Twitter, Facebook, for a time, Craigslist. Anytime anything ever free was posted, it just aggregated onto the site. Um, but it was like there was a few reasons for that. One is I was trying to learn how APIs work because I was working with a client that wanted to do all these crazy integrations. I wanted to figure out how like localized advertising worked. So I basically set up ad campaigns within like a 5 mile radius of Boston. Like, I have always tried to sort of work on things that were interesting to me so that I could sort of roll that into sort of the next thing, and be able to sort of compound on those different experiences to keep making cool stuff. And yeah, I've sort of always been interested in the side project and like the side hustle and sort of that side of things. But yeah, I mean, being able to And what's nice, I guess, as well, and I don't know sort of why sort of Warpcast is different in this sense, but the support of the things that are being produced, it just feels different than how I had done it before, and meaning like people interacting with it. And I think maybe one part of it is that when we're working on something and you're sharing something within sort of the Farcaster realm, unless you're sort of creating something completely uniquely new, you do have a bit of a baked in community around things, right? It's like when I started kind of organizing all the palettes for base colors, it's like I knew that if I posted to the channel, there are people there that are also sort of aligned and are interested in this type of thing, and can get a little bit of support from that. And you know I to be completely honest with you, man, like I remember I posted the first palette, I just made it as a post, and you replied and said mint it. And that literally had never even crossed my mind, because I was like, oh well, I'm just making cool stuff to like post on the channel. But like little pushes like that, it's like I said, you're creating within a community, and the incentive, it doesn't have to be monetary. It's just like, okay, the incentive is like making something cool, or like contributing to the conversation, or adding value, or making something a little easier for somebody. Which is the fine art project, which is I mean, that it's just it is an app that I built with AI, that you upload a picture, it generates the palette. I still need to do some work on that, but it's like I know that people, I had seen posts and had talked to people about like, well, how are you finding colors? And it's just like, well, I can just click around on the color spectrum and try and find cool colors, but like I could also discover them different ways. And I mean, to be honest with you, man, I don't even know if people ever even used the palette creator, like the image to palette. Um, but if they did, great. If it's a cool way for them to find, new colors, and, a different way of exploring, art, or, just having a different experience, like that's a win for me. It's like that is, as cheesy as is, like that's why I do it. I'm just like, I don't know, these are fun, interesting things, and cool experiments. So why not give it a go?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's been really enjoyable, I would say, about Farcaster to date, Warpcast, is it seems to reward just doing things that you're interested in, which I think in general, the world does reward that eventually. At least I believe that, and I've experienced that to date. But
Hmm.
it's not trivial to do that, or to you know have persistent faith in that, because you hit obstacles in the road where you can keep doing what you feel like you want to do and following your interests. But as obstacles come up in the road, it's harder to diverge from the number of paths that are available to you that are much more well trodden, and like you can just do that thing, and you can sort of foresee where that will go. You do this job, you get that promotion after this many years, and you can buy this house in this neighborhood, and like you can sort of there's much more sort of like projectable, forecastable lives, I think, and paths,
Hmm.
versus sort of following your interests without knowing where they might lead, and knowing that you can't know where they might lead. And so I feel
Hmm.
like that's part of what's cool at like a meta level about Farcaster to date, is that it sort of seems to be this economy that seems to be rewarding that, perhaps because it's a part of not just this growing social network of Farcaster, but also this growing protocol of Ethereum, and this growing uh, space at large of crypto. And when everything like at the base level is growing, I think maybe that's a part of what can drive just following your interest to be working. Whereas I don't know, like I said, I do believe that it works to some degree at the global level, just in life in general. But I think it's probably easier to have it work and see it work more quickly when like sort of there's a base of growth around everything. And so yeah, I don't know. It's a cool, it's a relatively fast feedback loop for being able to do interesting things and seeing the fruits of those efforts fairly quickly, whether again it be just a few people taking an interest in something that you did, or and like in a more human way, I feel, than like Twitter, like the first thing that stood out to me about Farcaster when I first joined was, and I was basically just mirroring my tweets at that time, was just that, you know, I might not have gotten like as many likes and whatnot on Farcaster, but the engagement was of such a greater quality. Like the comments were like real people saying real
Yeah.
things, whereas Twitter was just like the default is to not comment. The default is just to like, unless you kind of have something in a lot of cases like not very nice or very human to say,
Yeah.
and it's just like a dunk or whatever. And so I feel like that sort of has stuck around as well, despite multiple like sort of step function growth periods for Farcaster. I think one of the big ones was around frames and around degen tips, and maybe recently around Clanker. And so like there's been these few times where it seemed like Farcaster was kind of like blowing up, and like the quantity was going way up sort of suddenly, and I sort of worried the quantity was like that, or the quality rather, that everyone has been enjoying might sort of like vanish with that. But it seems to have thus far continued to sort of come back to the quality level that it had prior to the steps, while still growing the quantity, which has been cool to see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
no, sorry. No, the thought about quality just made me think of the fact. I was like, I was asked to be a mod for the music channel, which has, I think 70 something thousand, way more than that. I should know this. But, in talking with some of, those folks, we've been sort of having these discussions around like what makes a good post. And it's like it goes back to that sort of that quality sort of comment that you just made, which I thought was really interesting, is like, for a channel like music, it's like you want people to be publishing, right? Like the idea is to share music and have interesting conversations about music, and things that are happening in music. But there's a threshold of like what good looks like. And what I think is a bit different in sort of Warpcast sort of lens is there. I think people are a little bit, I don't know, people are nicer. And just how sort of channels are objectively organized, you know, you can sort of coach people into knowing what a good post looks like. You
Hmm.
can have conversations with people to, about what they're posting. And I think sort of all of those things sort of coming together, do elevate the quality of the content. Like, since becoming the mod, I mean, I get people messaging me all the time, like, hey, can you add me to the group? Add me to the group. And then I look at their profile. It's just like you spam. That's all you do. So it's just like and the I think the easy solution, or sort of like the historical sort of way of thinking, is just like you kind of just ignore that kind of shit, right? You delete it, you don't engage, just it is what it is, let it lie. um Whereas I think, and again, I'm just using music as the example because it's the biggest sort of channel that I'm involved with, but it's just like, most of us respond to people that want to get membership and tell them either, yeah, sure, we'll add you right now, or like, hey, this isn't how we post. Provide a little bit of context for, with the link, whatever. So it's like you can, I just think, just given sort of the type of people that are on the platform that have been around for a little bit, there's, I'm gonna say an obligation, but like I think what makes the platform special and the network special is the human element of it, where it's like, I can have that conversation and be like, hey man, don't just post shitty links to the channel because no one wants to see that. It's just like, hey, this is the third time you've done it. Um, this is sort of what good looks like. And we have some example, like I've sent examples of stuff to people to people that have requested, but I think that there's that element of like the coaching of sort of the next class, or sort of next wave of people that are going to be joining the platform. And you can feel, I mean, you can go into Dune and look at how many new users there are, right? Like there's the transparent nature of the network, but it's just like, regardless of that, like if you're not looking at numbers, you can feel, if you're in the feed, you can feel when there's an influx of people, right? Like you know when there are a lot of like new accounts. And like I said, I think that there's something to be said about sort of building community on the platform, and putting the social back in social media. I know it's like super corny, but like, be social with people, have conversations, don't just like shit post. And I think that only needs to continue as the network evolves.
Yeah, I didn't. It's interesting. I didn't realize you were modding the music channel. That's like, first of all, like a huge channel just quantitatively, like you said, and then second of all, I don't know. I think of music as it's going to be interesting to see what happens with and can be done with channels. Like
Yeah.
obviously, Warpcast has been experimenting with some things. Most recently, not just following them, but the membership concept where only members can post and whatnot, which I think was generally good improvement. I mean, it's kind of it's pretty surprising how positive and alongside that, like not negative, the feedback was. I felt like just public feedback in the feed on the latest Farcaster, like sort of update with the channel membership. And I think it was like, dropping display names and just having usernames. Like there's a few things that were like not super insignificant. They got rid of like the circles at the top, and I guess they did
Yeah.
ultimately like add them back as tabs. So these weren't like necessarily all like super revolutionary things, but they were big enough changes that typically on these social sites, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or whatever it might be, Instagram, my experience on any of them has been like I've almost never seen like a positive response to an update.
To an
Like
update.
people always dislike it, and then over time it's fine. Like they end up liking
Yeah.
it, using it just as much, if not more. It's like when Apple inevitably removes one of the plugs from their, or one of the whatever from their phone or laptop or whatever, you end up getting this laptop that has like no plugs. And people are like, man, like give me my plugs back. But it's like eventually you just get used to it. It's fine. But with Farcaster, like with the latest one, people are just like, oh man, like I love this, like so much cleaner. And like I don't feel like the vibe ever changed, and people just got used to it. And like it seemed to have been an update that just went over quite well. And so, I guess the reason I bring that up is like that was some experimentation with the channels, and I'm curious to see, what can be done. Like obviously there's a lot of channels that are doing more or less, the same, and not really, taking too many steps outside of what other channels are doing. But there are channels that are really experimenting with things, and I think music is one that is naturally sort of like inclined to do that because it's music, because there's an audio component to it that doesn't exist with a lot of other channels. And
Mhm.
like when I start, like before we launched Base Colors, I was just building it. I remember thinking like I was just having a ton of fun like creating like visual images, like possible advertisements, basically. Like advertisements, is a bad word, but like uh you know, basically an advertisement, like an image. But like,
Yeah.
I like stuff that's more like it looks like something that you would find in in a magazine in like the '60s or something. Like I like
Yeah.
kind of images like that. And so I'm like creating some of these things, and I realized like, man, this is like so easy. Like there's so much I can do here because it's literally just colors. Like
Mhm.
it's so fundamental and it's in everything. And I was like, the best analogy that I could come up with for describing this, like I was having a few conversations at the time and trying to explain like why it was so nice and like easy and felt good and like natural. And I would always compare it to music. I was like, imagine if you like were charged with advertising music. Like that's the closest thing I can think of to colors, where it's just like everyone loves music, like, and there's so much of it, and like it's kind of everywhere. And like, advertising would be so easy. You can literally pick Beethoven or the Rolling Stones or Jay-Z. You can take whatever you want and like, make some cool content with it. And it's not like directly saying, hey, here, go, buy Base Colors, or here, go, follow the music channel. But it's just like, we like colors, we like music, and here's something that sort of is, here's some content around that. And so I feel like there's a large opportunity with the music channel for that reason, because it's, it is this section or the channel on Farcaster that is, it's the one for music. I mean, unless someone
Yeah.
comes and someone could build like I don't know, a Zora for music, and there I actually had an interesting conversation on my other podcast with RAC, who's been very into like
Hmm.
crypto and pretty prominent musician for a while, and he's working on an app now that's something like Goodreads for music, basically. And his
Sweet.
sort of his big breakthrough was like after years of trying to combine crypto and music, and definitely had some successful experiments. But his realization was basically like everyone wants to make the music app built on crypto that's for listening to music, like a Spotify or an Apple, but crypto. But
Hmm.
his thing was like with all of the like licensing requirements and the music industry, the way it works, and all of these things, like it's just not really that doable, at least from his perspective. And so the thing to do is like you don't have to be the app where people are listening to music. You can just be the app where people are sharing and talking about music. And I feel like the channel could develop like in a direction like that, or the channel could also just be a home where several different builders are experimenting with various types of music apps. But I guess how did you like come to be the mod in the first place? Like do you have any sort of desires for where the music channel goes, or what things you like about it now, or which would be a little bit different?
Um, to be honest, no, I just really like music. No, I mean, I have posted there. I had a streak going. I think it was 69 days, which conveniently ended on a meme. But um, yeah, to be honest, I just really like music. I guess a part of my sort of background that I kind of omitted was I've always loved music. There was a period of time between like the ages of 19 and like 25 that I was doing like merch for bands. I was doing tour management. So like just all the things that I love, right? It's just like it's music and merch. But no, I really enjoyed posting there in the channel, and finding new music and sharing music, and like, oh, you just posted this, if you like that, you're gonna love this, and like just this kind of like a musical sort of rabbit hole that I've gone down. And I just if I joke that it's like if you ever need to get a hold of me, just like send me a message because I'm on my computer. It's like if I'm on my computer, I'm listening to music, right? Like
Right.
obviously not right now, but so it just sort of felt like if I'm doing work, and I'm air quoting again, but it's like if I'm doing work or sort of sharing things for the community in places like Base Colors or Purple, or Higher or wherever, when I'm sharing in music is like for me, I guess. It's just like this is the shit that I'm listening to. These are like interesting sounds that I think other people should listen to. Um, and yeah, I mean that's sort of how it kind of all unfolded. And it's really interesting is around the time that I was chatting with Ghost Links, who's one of the, I think he's actually the creator of the music channel. um but we were sort of talking about like, okay, well, what do these channel updates mean for people posting? Like how can we still ensure that, like, you can get access to sharing and being able to discover music and all these different types of things. And you made a comment earlier that sort of made me think about this is the just, I guess, the permissionless nature of the network is like WordCast didn't build in it. I mean, and whether people want to admit it or not, like they didn't necessarily build in the bet. Like when they updated channels, it wasn't the best experience for channel owners, in terms of moderation and sort of like how you sort of interact. And I think about like music, it has 70,000 member or sort of followers. Um, that's an insane volume for someone that's sort of just like managing a program. And what I think is interesting about the network and sort of how people just creating utility is tools were built, right? It's like, AutoMod existed, but like there's, I think, three or four other sort of services or technologies that have been developed to like help make the moderation process better. And it's like I just think that sort of that permissionless nature, of sort of, we're all building this together. Obviously, the rails are there, but it's like you can build on them, and make really useful things. And it just, it's funny. I now think about just like having used the word utility because I feel like that was like the big sort of the big thing back in like 2021, like the NFT run was just like, what's the utility? And nobody had utility, right? It was like everybody was just sort of figuring it out as you went. And now it's like you're creating utility because the opportunity exists, not because you have to, which I think is probably a more powerful sort of outcome of a product than trying to whip something together to please token holders.
Yeah, it's pretty funny the comment on utility. It's like such a overused word in my view. And like granted it is very general, so it can be used like generally, but um like I know, when we first started with people were minting base colors and most people are sort of like pretty positive about it. Once in a while I get someone who's like, all right, like I got mine, like what's the utility? And I'm like, it's usually like sort of a low pro, like a basically a spammer. And I'm like, and I guess not always, but it's generally like a pretty low quality account. And I'm like, uh, I like I don't
It
know,
could
like
be anything.
I basically say like there I basically say there is none. But I'm
Yeah.
like, you just get it like if you want it. I'm like, what's the utility of like anything? I mean, not anything you buy, obviously things are useful, but like I guess a piece of art on the wall, like, it's like why would you buy that? Like what's the utility? It's just like, well, you like enjoy it, like you want it, you want to put it in your
Yep.
house. And it's like that's sort of like the starting point for me. And I think it's been interesting, even like that was 5 6 months ago when we launched. And so I think that utility question was sort of a legacy default question from the last cycle.
Yeah.
And now this cycle, it's pretty interesting to see like, with this whole meme coin craze, it's just like sort of directly in opposition to that. It's like there is no utility, and like we're gonna be super upfront. Like there's just nothing here. It's literally just a meme. Like, do you want
Yeah.
some coins? And so it's like the polar opposite. And for what it's worth, like I do think, I don't really like to talk about it or tweet about it or cast about it too much because I just think the word, like I said, is just so overused. So I'm not going to be like, the utility is this, the utility is that. But it's just like there are a bunch of things factually that you can do with base colors, in my view, that you can't do with most other NFT collections. Like, for example, you can't go, the recent one that like Gayatri did with base logos. I don't know if you saw that one, but it's like a
Mhm.
base logo with, 10,000 different base colors, like one color for each logo. And then when someone minted it, they would actually earn the owner of the color used for that particular logo would earn like 15% of the mint revenue, which is like a small amount of money. And it's not supposed to be like anything other than that, but it's just like sort of a cool proof of concept. It's like any
Mhm.
collection creator could do that. And then they can sort of like you talked earlier about, you have a channel that you can go post and you'll get some support. In this case, it's like if you integrate base colors and offer a small royalty split as a creator of a collection, you can kind of tap into that base colors community. And maybe, if it's happening a lot, like the base colors community isn't going to like, be super strong in support of every single collection that integrates, but like at the very least, you can try to tap into it. And like, that's just not something that you can do with, mutant bored apes or whatever. It's like you can't like have art that
Yeah.
is like comprised of mutant bored apes and then like reward the mutant like it's just not a thing. And so
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like I think because of how fundamental colors are, they just are workable with a lot of different things. And so it'll be curious to see how it all develops. But yeah, the utility question is just like, I don't know. I'm like, I'd rather if even if you have a question around utility, like just like use a different word or something. Besides like, what's the utility? It just feels like a question that like you read somewhere that you're supposed to ask when you go and participate in like a project. And it's like just kind of feels, not
Well,
like the move.
it's funny though, because it's like I sort of joked, it's just like with base colors, it's like there isn't any utility, like go make your own. And it, what's great about that is like I mean it is a joke, but there is some truth to that, right? And I mean it's like if you own, trying to think of an example, is like, I mean, the base logos, it's like in order to get that sort of that rev share, it's like you have to own a color, right? It's like for base words, it's like I think you have to own two colors, right? So it's just like if you are a holder of the token, things exist that can be created out of it, in a pretty novel way, right? I mean, it's simple in the sense that it's just colors, but it's, interesting in the sense that it is, you can build on top of them, which is maybe a good time to bring up the base color palettes, which was a sort of an idea, having acquired a bunch of colors shortly after the project rolled out. And I was like, I was just making colors or sort of palettes of colors that I thought were really interesting, and sharing them and minting them. And then, I built that little app to basically just, like, you upload the photo, it generates the palette with new ways to find colors, but also to generate palettes. And I got really sort of intrigued, sort of went down the rabbit hole on sort of color theory and sort of how colors work together and composition over the summer, and had pulled together some ideas. And that was actually, I think, one of the first times that you and I connected, because I was like, hey, I have this idea. I have zero idea what I'm doing, and you connected me with a developer, Johnson, who has worked on some other things with base colors and just in general. And he's been jamming on this idea, which is due to come out, anytime now, right? It's like the utility is what you can create from the thing, and I think that sort of shift is really unique to sort of, I think, where we're at on the timeline of, you know crypto, and just sort of what people can do with their tokens, and what their, the coordination, I guess, that kind of comes with it as well.
Yeah, I'm stoked for palettes to come out. I mean, ever since you basically shared your first one, I was like, okay, that's sick, and like would like to see more of that. And then, sure enough, sort of found a way to get it built. I think by the time we put this out, it'll probably be out, or it'll be like it'll be right around the same time. And
Yeah.
to
Well,
your
go
point, like,
if
yeah,
you're
it's
listening, go get a palette.
yeah,
It'll
go get
it'll
a
do you
palette.
good.
What did we decide? Do you remember what did we decide on the domain palettes? It's pretty clean.
Palettes. It's palettes.fun, I believe, is
Palettes
where
dot fun.
what we landed on.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I
and
was like, that's what I was thinking, and I was like, it can't be that clean, is it? And but sure enough, that's
sure enough,
palettes
yeah.
dot palettes dot fun.
But it's also kind of funny, just as like an aside, and just thinking about how just how things sort of compound. Is like, you and I have talked before about sort of this idea of, from using base colors as, eh, I guess, like, sort of the traditional term would be like accessibility, but sort of the another way to think about it is maybe like customization, where it's just like, if I go to a website and I connect my wallet, sort of the default is, it's white, black background, whatever it may be. But like, is there a timeline where, you connect your wallet, the wallet recognizes that you have a palette, or it's sort of in that connection, it realizes you have a base colors palette, and then, the visual of the web experience actually changes to reflect sort of the colors that you really like, as opposed to kind of the generic default. And it's just like, you know, we haven't got there. Maybe we will. Who knows? But it's like, being able to use the sort of the primitive, and building on top of it, and how all of those things sort of compound into one another over time. I think it's like, I mean, it's super cool, right? And it's that I can't think of any other sort of time in my sort of, side hustle sort of maker life, where I think there was sort of the coordination between people, but also like, it's a dark line. It's a little unclear what it looks like, but like, there's definitely a line that like connects all these things together. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun playing with base colors over the last few months.
Yeah, and I appreciate all of it that you've been engaged as you have, and actually creating rather than just going and mint. I mean, minting and naming is great. That's part of what I like about it. Is like it sort of makes um in a few ways it kind of makes the consumer in a traditional sense. I mean, crypto in general sort of makes the consumer into an owner, and then in a lot of cases, and that's not novel about base colors, obviously, but in this case, the owner I feel is also partially like not only is the consumer an owner, but the owner is a creator, the owner is an artist in
Yeah.
a way, because
Hell
you
yeah.
are going and choosing the color that you want out of 16,777,216 colors. You're finding the exact one that you want for some reason, and whatever that reason is, as long as it's not random, that sort of adds meaning to the thing. It's not just, one of a 10,000 NFT collection that you sort of minted at random. It's like you went and picked this thing, and then probably to commemorate that or some ways related to that, you then go and give it a one of one name. And, the names are rare, which is kind of cool. It's like, you can't just go willy nilly get whatever name for whatever color you want. You have to like, there's a scarcity element. Like you have to go and you have to get the best name for the best color that you want, but like you can't just have any color, you can't just have any name. And so it becomes like a bit of a game. And then beyond that, obviously you can use them to, there's been a few projects already that you can use them to color in art however you want. And so that adds sort of like, you know, the artist component where the owner becomes actually the creator and the artist, not only in like picking the color and the name, but actually like coloring things in a way that, to your point, like if you're sort of versed in color theory or just have a good eye for aesthetics, like you can go and do things that are like better or worse. Like that's my whole thing, is like you can just go and like mint 100 colors if you want, and that's fine. But like you can go and like mint one specific color with one specific name that I don't know like what the value of these things is going to be in the long run, but it seems pretty obvious. I mean, there's even people today, like my wife has pure white, which is like FFF, and this is an extreme example obviously, but like there's this guy who actually I really like and respect. He's a builder in the space himself, and he keeps asking me like, how much does she want for FFF, and I'm like, dude, like it's not like that one's not for sale. Like that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so like just the fact, like that's an extreme example, but when you can use an extreme example to realize that like this thing is super valuable, like basically invaluable to my wife, then it's like there would seem to be, it might be like sort of a power law distribution from your random color with a random name that's like the 16 millionth one minted and pure white. But regardless of what that distribution is, whether it's like a power law or just sort of gradual or whatever, like there is seemingly better and worse colors and better and worse color names with a higher variance than something like like I said, your average 10K NFT collection. That there's definitely like traits that are more valuable and whatnot, but it's like sort of a relatively tight band. I mean, even
Yeah.
CryptoPunks, just because of the sheer, the absolute value of their worth, there's a pretty wide distribution from like, 150,000 or 200,000, whatever the floor is today, to, you know, 10 million plus or whatever that might be. That's like the latest, highest, transaction. And that's like a huge range, but even that is like probably going to be, if base colors were to become successful, like I think my view at least is that like the floor color, like the average random color, I mean for a very long time you're gonna be able to mint one for just the initial mint price, which is $3 or whatever, 0.001 Ethereum, which hopefully doesn't get too, I mean, I would like if Ethereum appreciates over time, but I also don't want like the base colors price to get like out of hand.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think over time, like if it did well, like just basically today, if you take the initial mint price of, $3, and then the price at which, I mean, there's these, like I would never sell, for example, like blue, but I did sell, like I tried to, I didn't want to like mint too many like great colors with names, because that's not my goal as a creator of the project, but there were some that I wanted. And so like one of those was the background blue from CryptoPunks,
Hmm.
and the name CryptoPunks, and someone offered zero point 0.1 ETH for that. And like, is that good value for it? Like, I don't know, like who am I to really say? But I was so, I'm very motivated to like, that's the first 100x appreciation on a color from like mint to sale. So like I was super happy to do that. Plus the buyer was, someone who's awesome, and has been like also, color base colors guy from day one, and love what he's working on and everything like that. So it's like in general, it's pretty cool to see that. It's like sort of a first proof of concept that like colors can have this wide range. But anyway, as you can sort of tell, I can go very deep down the rabbit hole here, but I
Yeah.
totally agree with your point earlier. That's like it can be as simple as like, what's your favorite color? Like I like that color, whatever. Or it can be as deep as like color theory, which I don't even, the funny thing is like I'm not I before doing this, like, now people like associate me with colors, but like I wasn't really any more into colors than the next guy. Other than that, I did have, this blue circle logo, blue dot logo that I've been using as my like sort of trademark like website and PFP and
Yeah.
everything for 5 years. But that was really like that's a specific thing. That's like a blue dot. Other than like the blue dot, which I have my own sort of separate reasons for, I wasn't like super into like colors or anything. And so I just thought I thought it was like the most interesting NFT collection. Like not to sound whatever, but I thought it was like the most interesting possible NFT collection basically. And so I was like, I gotta go do
Yeah.
this.
I
And
mean,
also I sat
yeah.
on it for like 3 years before building it as well. So
Well, it's funny too because it's just like if you, I mean, it's a wonderful idea, and I mean, the volume of was it like 16 million, right? It's just like that's crazy, right? Like if you were going to build it, eventually, hopefully, someone would have. But I am glad that you did. But no, it's funny you talking about just like even using colors in like interesting ways and sort of like the value of all of these things, and an example of sort of use and something that I intend to explore more is using colors that I have acquired from base colors for some of the merch being created for higher market. So like the release that was
nice.
last week, it was like Blackout, which is sort of like all the sort of the base shirts or sort of the item, they were all black, and I used like a super super dark green for all of the logos and sort of the branding. But I found that color on base colors. I bought it, and then I reorganized and sort of redesigned sort of how I was thinking about what the collection would kind of come look like using that color. And like, you know, yeah, nothing sort of formal, obviously, but like, I've thought out sort of a an editorial calendar for higher market merch through the end of next like through 2025, and like there are very specific moments throughout the course of the year when it's just like I'm going to lean into the colors and I'm going to find them on base colors, whether it's something that I either find new colors that I think are really compelling, or and it's kind of sort of match with like the mood or sort of the vibe of the release, or it's going to be stuff that I already own because I'm just like I love these colors and I want to see things in the world with those colors.
I feel like you've got to bring some orange into play with higher. I know,
There's
you
not
know.
enough orange in the world, and that's what
I
I
just
have to
I just
say
like
about
set you
that.
off. I just set you off. That's like a
No,
trigger.
yeah, man. No, it is one, I guess, sort of one side note, 'cause a bunch of people have asked me, they're like, what's the deal with the orange? Is like my I don't really there isn't one. My high school growing up was black and orange, so I think I sort of have an affinity for the color orange from a very early age. But like I think about it where it's like there's not a lot of orange. You don't see it very often. And when you do, I'd like to think that it's just like, oh shit, I just saw orange. I haven't seen that in a while. And what's actually kind of interesting is as we were kind of talking about some of the different like NFT collections and things, and the orange that I use that was the first base colors that I bought was actually of the background color of an NFT that I had been using for like 2 years at that point, and the
Hmm.
collection had sort of like died and sort of fizzled out. But I was like, I didn't necessarily want to rep a collection that was like, had disappeared and kind of evaporated. Um,
But the
so
color lives on.
but the color lives on, man. And it's like, and then I had been using that color. I made like a bunch of like, I made like buttons and stuff for NFT NYC when I went down there with the NFT. So like the orange sort of existed, and I sort of had this persona around the orange. Um, and like I said, when the project sort of ended, I was just like, well, I still am like the orange guy, like I still like orange. So and to be honest with you, it was sort of a placeholder. And then like shortly around the time that Base Colors was coming out, I was sort of like, well, I don't know really what to do with my profile picture, and then I was like, oh shit, like this is perfect. This is the perfect solution for me. I don't have to worry about, the clout of, whatever, NFT that I bought that probably wasn't worth what I paid for it. And I can actually just use the color that I identify with, that is ubiquitous through my life, and whether it's, it was the NFT background, or it was, school, or it was, whatever. It's like I still have the orange, and now I seek out orange things because why not? You don't see it
Yeah, it's
enough.
great. I have this I have this, thing as well where like now I just like notice colors so much more. Like my awareness of colors is just like uh just infinitely higher than it used to be. And in general, I think, you don't want to be aware. There's certainly negative things that if you were to increase your awareness of, they would be like pretty detrimental to living. But there are some things that you increase your appreciation or awareness of. And I think more often than not, just like having a higher awareness of things in life. Again, there might be some negative ones, but more often than not, I think it's just nice to sort of have a higher awareness for things and like to notice things more. And so I've really enjoyed the increased awareness of colors,
Oh
just as
yeah.
a byproduct of spending so much time with them. And I did not know the origin story of your orange, and it's super cool
Yeah.
to hear it. And also, I generally agree with you. I think orange is pretty criminally underrated, and it's just like sort of this color that just doesn't quite get the love or appreciation that I would say it deserves. I had like five things come up as you were just talking that like I'm just like sort of rattling through all of them because they're all like relevant. The other one is that I passed a car like literally right as you were talking about how sick orange is. That was like a really nice car in a really beautiful orange. So
I
I
love
took a
that.
picture
Nice.
and I will send that your way. It's just it felt somewhat serendipitous. And then what was the last thing? Let me think. I had one more thing. I don't think I'm going to be able to come up with it. But I'll remember in a second, I bet. But the other thing I did want to mention is it's cool that you brought up this concept of, oh, I remember the thing that I forgot. I knew I was going to right when I moved on. So it's the color orange. One thing that's kind of cool about it is I don't know if you recognize this, but uh you saw obviously about like the Apple Vision Pro when it came out, like I don't know, 6 months ago, whatever that was. I don't know if you got a chance to try one or whatever, but
Mhm.
you were aware of them, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, so I did try it. I ordered one with sort of a plan to uh I wasn't like ordering it for certain to just turn around and return it, but I ordered it with the knowledge in mind that I was going to default to returning it unless I had a real strong reason to keep it, just because it's a lot of money. If it ended up
Yeah.
becoming something that was going to be like a laptop level usage for me, then I certainly would have kept it because it's more expensive than a really nice laptop, but it's not like that much more expensive. And so if
Yeah.
it was going to be useful at that level or used with that frequency, then I would have kept it. But absent that, I wanted to like make sure going in, I was like, if I don't have a really darn good reason to keep this, I'm going to return it, because if I just default to keeping it, which mostly is what you do when you buy things, then you end up sort of trying it, being like, "Oh, this is cool. I'll keep it," because you didn't default to returning it, and then like next thing you know, it's just accumulating. You have this, $4,000, clanker
Paperweight. Yeah.
to use the relevant word, like sitting in your closet just picking up dust, which is what happened to my, Meta Oculus Quest or whatever, which much more reasonable at like $300 price point or whatever. Um, so anyway, I bring it up because it had, it's pretty like bland coloring in terms of like, different shades of gray. It was a pretty beautiful device, I would say. And
Mm.
for what it's worth, I really thought it was pretty awesome. I just sort of was aware that I wasn't going to use it much.
Yeah.
It's this weird contrast of being genuinely awesome, but also not something that you're going to use much. But
Yeah.
that's sort of the sweet spot that it fell into. And the besides the the various like sort of grayscale coloring, it had like these nice orange accents, which I think you would have very much appreciated.
Ooh.
And they reminded me of also like Virgil Abloh, with like off white. Like they tend to use he uses mostly black and white, But he uses orange frequently as like an accent for like the tags and whatnot. And
Oh
so
yeah.
orange seems to be this like very nice. Like I feel like if you get basically an endorsement by usage on major products by both Apple, granted it's not like the same Apple that it used to be, but it's nonetheless Apple, and Virgil Abloh and Off-White, it's like those are some pretty good endorsements for like orange accent being the move. And it's for whatever reason, like I do, it resonates with me as working very well. Like I don't think a blue or a yellow accent would like quite hit the same. It just there's something very nice about it, I feel.
Well, thank you. No, I mean that's hey, that's good company to be in though. I don't mind being associated with the Virgil and with Apple. So that's great. Yeah, I mean
It's
it's it's
I was just
yeah,
I was just gonna
I'll
say
own it.
I was just gonna say it's just my 2 cents. I don't want to like push too hard on it, but I would
No, I
love
mean
to
I'm
see
of
some
course.
some orange accents on the higher merch. And like you don't have to do it on on all of them for people who are maybe purists and they prefer the black and the white and the green. But
Yeah, of course.
some orange accents, even if it's just like the tag, I don't know.
Oh yeah.
I'd be psyched to see that. Also, there's like people have made these analogies between like higher and Nike in some ways, and
Oh
Nike's got
yeah.
the orange going. So
Yeah.
I think there's some room to work with there for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's funny. I actually was. I have like a board of it's just a folder. I'm not going to call it a mood board, but I have a folder of just like orange things, and there's a lot of Nike in there. Um, just because I, the history of Nike is really impressive, and obviously from a business and brand, but from a design and creative perspective, and some of the iconic advertising and just like the bold text and the color, like it's just always been something that I've always really appreciated. So yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
often think about Nike and the orange, and the especially that Nike orange pretty regularly.
yeah. I mean, Shoe Dog is one of my favorite
Oh,
books,
it's the
and
best.
Just Do It. I would say maybe Just Do It is definitely up there for my favorite slogan of all time. And the first two I mentioned earlier, like playing around with some base colors ads. Early on, like before we even launched. And the first two that I did, I think I posted both of them publicly at some point, but one was Just Mint It, with
Nice.
this with the same exact text as like the black and white text, black background, Just Do It. And you know how like there's a version of that that has like the sort of I'm not sure what the right way to say it. It's like a square, but turned on its side a little bit with the
Mhm.
Nike logo in it, like off to the right. And so I just removed the Nike text from that orange, but like used the same exact orange. It's already an orange square with like
Yeah.
the Nike logo in it. And so I just removed that. And so it was like Just Mint It with the orange square. And I thought that was awesome. And then there was I don't remember which was first, which was second, but the first two was that. And then um what was it? It was like the Think Different from Apple with
Yeah.
the multicolored, like not their more recent logos, but the old one that had the multiple colors like sort of stacked on top of each other. And so
Hmm.
just using the base colors logo, which is basically that, flipped 90 degrees because the lines on the base colors logo are like or the bars are like vertical rather than horizontal instead of
Hmm.
the apple. And so like those are my first two. So it's just kind of funny that we're talking about.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Obviously, those are brands that I admire in a lot of ways. Although both have certainly a decent amount of flack.
Yeah.
Like the origin stories and the early days of both of those brands are really
Yeah.
are inspiring to me.
It's a maybe like a warning for the future, because and it's funny. I mean, like, not to say that I think higher market is gonna maybe, I mean, it'd be sick, but to just sort of learn from some of those things. And I take a lot of inspiration from a lot of those brands, and just thinking about aesthetic and layouts and all of those types of things. So it's funny. It's like the the whole idea for higher market was really like I just wanted to see. I really wanted I I kept seeing all these posts for all these different things that people were making, and I was like, it'd be really great if all those things were together. And maybe we can have another longer chat about sort of long term vision of higher market. But I just think about you know it would be great to sort of grow that sort of thing or sort of this idea into something that, you know, you could go into a store and go buy something from one of the makers that are on the platform. It's really, and now I'm sort of going down a little bit of a tangent, but like I think about like all these, some of these big sites where it's like Karma Loop. I think Karma Loop was such a sick example of this, like back in the day. Karma Loop was a streetwear platform that was, I think, started really as a blog, and that they were buying clothes from different sort of lines and makers that they really liked, and it turned into this big thing, and it's now sort of fizzled out a bit. But again, it's just like, how can you sort of create this like hub for this one specific thing where it's just like, hey, if I want to go buy any type of higher merch, I just, like in my head, it's just like, I need some higher merch. I go to the market, and like that idea of like, how do you sort of bring people together around this thing where people can equal parts be creative and produce and make things that they like and that they care about, but also like, you know, uh, being a resource to help people do that. Or I want to go buy some merch, or I have an idea for merch, or whatever it may be. But like, the vision is definitely to see where it grows, and there's been a lot of enthusiasm around it as well. But it's like, I think about, it's like, how do we sort of grow this thing up, so that it could be in a conversation to go be put in a store, or something that people outside of the ecosystem are wearing and talking about. So
Yeah, I've got to I got to talk to you about something in regards to higher merch post this chat, but I also have to go and gear up. I've been seeing the tweets and the cast, and I've just been like, haven't quite clicked into it yet. So I got to explore the market. I got to go to the market, and I got to come home with some bags.
yeah, hey, there is a bag. There's a higher backpack as well. But yeah, I mean, check it out. I welcome any and all feedback, and I have been trying to connect with as many folks that are sort of currently making higher merch, or sort of things good. I've been calling them higher goods from higher makers, um, or people that are interested. Like, oh shit, like I've always wanted to have a like a higher, in my head. The first thing I just want to say, the first thing that came into my head as I was thinking about an example for merch was a cape. I don't know why, but if
Okay.
you want a higher cape, like let's make it. I mean, I don't know why you would, but we can figure out a way how to do it. And like that's sort of, again, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Is like, I love merch. I've built a bunch of merch stores. I've sold thousands and thousands of t-shirts over the course of my adult life. And being able to say, like, to somebody, and I was talking to somebody earlier this morning who was just like, hey, I really have this idea for a design. I want to put it on a t-shirt. And I was like, here is a brain dump of how you can go do that. Like, I will help anybody sort of go from, I have this idea for something that I want to put on a thing, to being able to wear that thing, or have that thing, physically being able to hold it. And
I love
I will just sort of add as well, is what I think is really interesting about merch, and this goes sort of beyond higher market, but now I'm on sort of a merch sort of thought here, is like, I think that there's a lot of value in making these goods available at scale. And and then the scale is the size of our current community, but the value extends beyond, which is, if I'm wearing a shirt that says like aim higher, or that says base colors, and it has a bunch of cool colors on, like, it could be, anything, is like you're wearing that out in the world. And the goal for me is to like have a positive conversation about the thing that you're wearing, which is inherent, it's crypto, right? And when people think about crypto, the average person is just like, oh, it's like the dumb monkey, JPEGs, um, FTX, and and losing all the money. It's like there's a lot of negative connotation that I think comes with sort of the industry. And I think that there's a really cool opportunity to sort of shift that narrative a little bit by showing sort of the culture and sort of the community that's being constructed, in the ecosystem, to be redundant. But like, you know, when somebody asks, is like, hey, what's the arrow about? go have a conversation about hire. You know what I mean? Like it's not the story of Sam, losing all the money or losing all Tom Brady's money. It's, we can have a conversation about like, yeah, there's this permissionless brand that exists on chain, and have that conversation. I think that that's really powerful. I think that's a different sort of perspective on what's happening um in our communities, that doesn't necessarily get picked up on MSNBC or Fox or whatever. It's usually the bad side. So to be able to have a positive conversation about things inorganically, right? It's just like you could walk down the street, nobody gives a shit that you have a shirt that says aim higher on it. But the person that does ask, I think it presents an opportunity to have a really constructive conversation about what's actually happening, instead of what's sort of the perception of the industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever you see like something, you know, call it merch, but basically just, clothing or something of that like that is remarkable in a literal sense, that it's worth remarking on, that it gets remarked on. Like there tends to be these pieces that like you might own a few, or, I know like that I do, that versus all of your other clothing. Like you're never gonna get a comment on like, a plain like, blue t-shirt, much as I love blue. But like there's a certain like pieces that are just kind of remarkable. And people, like to comment on them or like ask what they are. And what a great way to like, there's always like sort of a built-in respect into even getting to the point where you're asking like, hey man, like what is that shirt or what is that hat with that like aesthetic or that logo, whatever it
Yeah.
might, that slogan that I'm not familiar with, but I like it even though I don't know what it is. And that's like, if you want like a sort of a good conversation starter for anything, whether it's like a restaurant or in this case, a crypto project or a community or whatever it might be, it's like that's like the best intro ever. It's like, man, that looks great. Like I love that. What is that? And it's just like
Yeah.
you don't have to like sell someone from there. It's just like you just tell them about they're basically already sold the second that they ask about the thing. And then of course with, if it's just like, oh yeah, that's a, sandwich shop, then it might be, in LA and you live in New York, like not much you can do about it. But if it's something that's, digital first, then it's in this case, like, we're talking about higher, then it's like, great, I'm going to go and I'm going to get some and I'm going to, join the channel or whatever it might be. So,
Yeah, exactly.
totally aligned on all of that. I know that we have gone far over the scheduled time here.
Yeah.
Uh,
This was
and
a good combo though. I didn't
yeah,
mind. Yeah.
no, it's great, and I appreciate the time. But I'll wrap it there, and I'm sure this won't be the last of conversations that we'll have. But likewise, really enjoyed it, and excited to. Well, we're launching pallets probably next week, or probably by the
Yeah.
time this comes out, it'll be out, and excited to do that. Excited to check out the higher market, and excited to see a little bit more orange in the world.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you again, and I'm looking forward to seeing what unfolds in 2025. I think it's going to be a good year for everybody, and we'll get there. I won't say
Uh,
that we're all going to make it, but we'll all get there.
we might just all make it. You never know.
We might. You never know. You never know. But thank you. Seriously, I really enjoyed this, and we will chat soon.
All right, thanks,
All
Jack.
right,
I'll
all right,
talk
man.
to you.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye.